Hello and welcome, Life Athletes. Welcome to a special edition of the Life Athletics Podcast. Now, really what this is my friend Nikki had a podcast and she interviewed me a couple years ago and it never got published. So I asked for the recording and here it is. It was a very fun conversation. She is fantastic and it goes a little deeper into some of the things that I do, the things that I think about in ways that I don't normally go into when I'm hosting. People ask about these things, and so I thought I would release it here. Enjoy.
Yay! All righty. And we're live, folks.
And we're live.
And we're live.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. Wow, your podcast voice is so much better than mine. I should hire you to make some voiceovers for me. It's so professional, badass. In case you're all wondering who that strange, professional, awesome voice is on this here recording, that is my friend Nik Wood, and he's here with me today to have a conversation. We've already done a lot of dancing, so who knows what else will come from today's show. But I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for being here. And
dance more. It's great for an audio medium.
Yeah.
Dance.
It really is, you guys. When Nik and I hopped on before I hit record this morning, he had what was that? Destiny's Child. I'm not sure.
It was Beyonce.
Some old Beyonce going, and we had a little dance party, and I was just like, yes. And yeah, you guys know how I love to dance. And after a lot of dancing, he said, I can't believe you still want me to be on your show. And I was like, dude, I want you to be on my show more now. What are you talking about? So we got a couple class A weirdos in the house today. There's so much here. I'm really excited to begin this conversation. And when I was feeling into this conversation, I wanted to kind of tell the listeners a little bit about how we met, because it's kind of an interesting story and I think it creates a cool little background. So yeah, I want to tell that story.
Cool. I wasn't sure if you were like, and yeah, go. If I was supposed to tell it.
Well, we can tell it together. So Mr. Nik Wood here was in Bali. We had never met until one day when I sort of danced into a local cafe and restaurant because...
danced into my life.
Danced into your life like a storm, as usual, after I'd spilled some chocolate all over my dress. And I came in pretty loud and yeah, kind of like a tornado to clean off my dress. And I looked to my left, and there was this very tall man looking my way, and something about his presence just captivated me. And I was like, "Whoa, hi, hello, you exist." And
I'm fanning myself here. I was like, "Ooh, I like this version of the story."
Yeah, and so
I don't know if I've heard your version of the story before.
I don't know if you have either. This might be the first time. And so our eyes met. We met from across the room, and somehow we came together physically and just started chatting just for a brief while I'm like kind of cleaning off my dress, a little bit of a hot mess, and we made that first connection, and we shared a really beautiful hug. That's what I remember. And then we went on our ways. However, we did exchange WhatsApp numbers. However, we never saw each other again in real life, in person. Yeah, Mr. Nik Wood left Bali shortly after, and I went back to America for a bit.
Many tears were shed.
Yeah, many tears were shed, and it was like, oh, okay, cool. And we didn't really talk much after that until one evening when I had a dream with a semi-familiar man, tall man, and I couldn't quite put my finger on who was in the dream, but I somewhat recognized him. And then I woke up to a text message from Nik Wood saying, "Hey, you're on my mind. How are you?" And it's like, "Oh wow, you were in my dream," and that sort of bridged this connection. And I've had the opportunity of getting to know you more deeply and the many complexities that are you. And it's been quite a pleasure. So thank you for opening yourself up to this friendship from across the world. You're now coming in from Mexico, and I'm still here in Bali. So it's really great to know you. I appreciate you.
Aw, it's great to know you too. Um, I'm also sensitive to the fact that the audience has absolutely no context of who I am other than I'm captivating and tall. But
Yeah.
so like the version of the story, like for me, it was such a breath of fresh air. Like I'd been supporting a friend of mine through something. She was crying. I was like holding her through that, and it was beautiful. There's a feeling that I have sometimes in those situations where it feels like everyone's going to think that I did something to this woman, that she's crying in my arms in a restaurant.
Mm.
And so there was like some tenderness and a mix of like being present as much as I could for her, but also like when she left, and she left more empowered than when she arrived, and that was great.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just kind of landing after that.
Uh-huh.
And so I was in this large couch near sort of the staff like station at the restaurant. So you came in and you'd had some dessert explode on you. And it was just this sparkle of human showed up. And yeah, like I said, this is the first time that I've heard your version, but I guess I was captivating, but I felt captivating. Like you looked over and like there was something, and I said something, and you reacted, and I felt like extra funny, and then you lingered, and so I stood up, and there was this like, whoa, you're tall sort of moment, and it was really interesting feeling observed,
Mm.
like I was the first human you'd ever seen or something. But there was this freshness to how you met me that was
Mm.
delightful, right?
Mm.
It sort of skipped the sort of trying to play it coolness that a lot of people do in the world. And I felt seen, I felt met.
Mm.
And I mean, we've later realized that our birthdays are one day apart, and so there is a familiarity with energy
Yeah.
that might have something to do with that, depending on your view of astrology. But I remember, like, I asked you, like, would you like a hug? And you kind of looked like I'd asked you, or asked your inner child if she wanted her favorite toy for Christmas or something. You just looked delighted with the idea, and I hugged you, and I just remember leaving thinking that was a really nice hug.
Mm-hmm.
Like inside of like Bali and Ubud, Bali, where people have a reputation for hugging for 3 minutes every time they say hello to
Yeah.
anyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's a lot of hugs,
Mm-hmm.
but that hug stayed with me,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, we're both tall, and so that's nice to be met with another body that doesn't feel like I'm hugging a child.
Yeah.
But um, like, but it was more like the energy, right? I felt
Mm.
met. And so
Yeah.
when we started messaging again afterwards, there would be like a week or two between messages, but there were these 10-15 minute long messages sometimes that were really in depth. And so yeah, that's how our friendship started. It was
Yeah.
just being real and curious is what it felt
Yeah.
like.
Mm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your interpretation. It's really heartwarming and beautiful to hear. And yeah, as mentioned, our birthdays are one day apart. So you're one of my rare Scorpio friends, which just creates this depth and richness in our conversation, which I so enjoy.
Me too. I have a
Yeah.
ton of male Scorpio friends, not a lot of female
Mm.
Scorpio friends.
Mm.
Which is kind of odd,
Yeah.
but and people still don't have any context of who I am. Hi, I'm Nik Wood. I'm a coach. I do stuff. I don't know. Help.
Yeah, I'd love to actually. This is a question I like to ask folks to kind of introduce you to, the listenership here. So I would love for you to begin with a story from your life. You can pick any story, maybe a time in your life where everything changed, or I specifically have a soft spot for stories where your pain kind of becomes your path, or something that seemed like oh no became actually empowering. But you can pick any story you'd like to kind of open the door here to who is Nik Wood.
Oh, good Lord.
Mhm.
Well, what's that quote? Like, I contain multitudes.
Yeah.
There's so many different facets. I sound
Hmm.
so pretentious, but I kind of am. So there's so many facets to me.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out where to start. Like I
Hmm.
said, I'm a coach. I started coaching because people started asking me to coach them. I realized at a young age that in order to live anywhere close to the life that I wanted to, I needed to start programming my brain differently than what I was being subjected to.
Hmm.
My now ex-stepfather was, still is, really smart, brilliant, good-looking dude. But after a couple of years, tension just built and he started being abusive. And that went on till I got bigger than him, which not everyone gets to get bigger than their bullies, right?
Yeah.
But I knocked him over at one point and was like, we're done now, right?
Hmm.
And he landed on my little brother's Tonka truck or something. I'm sure it hurts. And he kind of
Hmm.
like looked up at me aghast.
Hmm.
But yeah, it did kind of shift that, which was nice.
Yeah.
But a lot of my trauma was not feeling protected by anybody. My dad was kept
Mm.
away, the big long legal story where he was blamed for things that weren't real, couldn't
Mm.
have access to me for a while. So like stuff. So
Yeah.
I started reading every self-helpy kind of book that I could find, listening to
Mm.
every Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, like anyone that I could listen to try to program myself to be, I don't know, have a hope for survival.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, I moved in with my dad for the last year of high school. He didn't know any of what was going on, and I was sort of guilted into not telling him.
Mm. Hmm.
And I remember sort of lashing out with anger at one point. We got into this big shoving match. And I didn't realize how large I was at that point, right? I still felt like this wounded, victimized thing. But
Hmm.
I was 18, 6'4", 6'5". I'm 6'6" now,
Yeah.
right? Like, and we were like $2, like at very extreme angles, shoving each other in the kitchen. But he outweighed me by a bit, and and I say this with love, like he I would never actually want to fight my dad because like he would destroy me. He's a nastier fighter than I've ever
Yeah.
hoped to be, and actually has experience of that. But I realized he wasn't trying to beat me. He wasn't trying to win. He was just
Hmm.
holding. And I burst into tears and just held, like he held me. And
Hmm.
I went from like living with my mom and ex-stepdad. I was failing out of school, and suddenly I was getting straight A pluses and dating the prettiest girl in school
Mm.
and having that support. And I
Yeah.
attributed a lot of it to my dad being in a men's group.
Mm.
So I read every book that his men's group had. And so now I'm a coach because I was listening to all that content because I needed it.
Yeah.
And I help run men's groups because I feel like it helped me survive.
Hmm.
And so there is a deeply rooted love and reverence and for this kind of work. And I also am sort of tongue in cheek about a lot of it as well. And
Yeah.
so if I ever sound irreverent, it's I grew up with British comedy around. But that's kind of what formed me.
Hmm. Yeah. It's,
Hmm.
I often notice, that thing that was so instrumental to us oftentimes when we're younger in our earlier years becomes what we want to bring to the world. So hearing that story for the first time, I've actually never heard that story with your father and your stepdad. It really makes sense to me when I think about the work you do, and specifically with this men's group, which you've been running for co-leading for 3 or 5 years now, if I remember, maybe longer.
Well, I've been running different forms of men's groups for a while.
Okay.
This one that we call Mentorship Mondays,
Yep.
we started 2.5 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
And the person that I co-started it with, Di Manuel, He just did a TEDx talk about it on Saturday
Wow.
and shared. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really beautiful. And my dad actually attends. We do a few different Zoom calls from around the world. My dad
Wow.
attends, and it was
Wow.
fun.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me sharing this. He so, like someone mentioned, oh, it's so great to see like a father son and like together working so well. It was a
Yeah.
hard fought thing.
Yeah.
Um, but they were sort of saying it like he was there to support me, and like with love and playfulness. I was like, he's not here for me. My dad's never listened to my podcast. Like he's here because he gets benefit, and I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
think I would feel odd if he was just there to like placate me,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
right?
Right.
He's there for him, and that
Yeah.
gives me so much joy. And so we
Mm.
have like a range of people from around the world, 3 different groups to meet different time zones because of the
Yeah.
current situation in the
Situation.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. Yeah. So mm, to me, my personal opinion is that men's groups are of huge value, especially in this particular time in the world where we're kind of transitioning, or I believe being called to transition from this sort of dominating patriarchy into this more symbiotic collaboration between the masculine and feminine, so to speak. So I'd love to hear, just in your opinion or in your experience, what has men groups offered you? How can men, for someone who's listening who's like, I don't really know what a men's group is, like what would I really do in there? Maybe you can share a little bit about that in your experience.
I'd love to. First, I'm going to say something that might make me really unpopular.
Yeah, great.
I I bristle with the term patriarchy. Now, I understand where people are coming from with the use of the word,
Hmm.
right? And I respect that, honor that, and I think they're right. I just wish we had a different word because
Hmm.
the root word is like the Latin word for father. And I think that the
Mm,
world is actually missing healthy fathering
yeah,
and is actually suffering because of that.
yeah.
And so the idea that patriarchy equals bad,
Mm,
right? I mean, and I'm not advocating for like a patriarchal society of any sort. I do subscribe to a much more egalitarian view, and
hmm.
like I would like strong men, strong women.
Yeah.
But I don't think that anyone benefits from making one group weaker,
Hmm.
right? I think men actually, even though they appear strong, are a very deeply wounded segment of the
Yeah.
population.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just masked by a whole bunch of gruff bravado. So,
Yeah.
what's a men's group? Different men's groups are different. Ours starts from my fundamental belief that like I start the groups literally saying, look, it's a men's group. We're all men here. Now what? What kind of
Mm.
man do we want to be? We're all here in those groups to because we're on the path to try to be better men, greater men, whatever that means
Mhm.
to us individually. And we're doing that in a group. So
Yeah.
we show up, there's certain rules and structures, and people share what's alive and real for them.
Hmm.
And I kind of created that structure because at first there was no structure. Um, yeah, my friend started the men's group because I had invited him to one in Ubud and he couldn't make it because he has 2 kids and it's like a hour drive sort of
Yeah.
thing. So when he said he was starting one, I showed up. But
Hmm.
for the first month and a half, it was just kind of freestyling and then it wasn't working. So we
Okay.
got on a call and said, hey, like, what do we want this to be?
Hmm.
But because it was in a more surfer community in Canggu,
Yeah.
um, I didn't want to be too heavy handed,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So a lot of men's groups are like coming of age rituals, screaming, pounding chests, and that can be great. I don't want to do that every week though.
Hmm.
What I want to do every week is show up and be real with guys.
Yeah.
And we like I've had people come in and criticize that we're not pushing. But what I found is that for the guys who resonate with this is like everything. And what excites me is like, are the stories where they come and say, because of this, I've now realized because we have one person share their time. There's no coaching, no advice giving as part of the format for our group.
Okay.
So guys coming in and saying, wow, I was able to listen to my wife for the first time without actually needing to say anything and just hearing her, or to my father, right? Having people who are in their 40s say that they had an interaction with their dad that was the deepest they've ever had before, because they got in a group of dudes on Zoom who actually just listened to them. Right? That for me is what lights me up. So like my coaching, I have people look at what's the furthest point that they can imagine. Like if everything worked, if all the work that they're doing, all these people doing inner work, if it worked, what would happen? What would that look like? Most people have no idea. They're so ingrained in the constant processing that they don't know where they're going. And so I call it horizon goals, right? Your horizon life, your horizon goals, then your horizon self. My horizon world, right, is still forming, but that's where my attention has been going lately. But it involves people feeling safe wherever other people are, right? Like it bothers me that there's still so much abuse in the world, and so much of it is perpetuated by men on women, on children, on each other, right? Not to say that women don't also do awful things, but putting that aside, right? A lot of it's coming from men. So the more that we can get men feeling strong, stable, healthy, secure, pointing in a good direction, the more it brings the world I want to live in to be. So that's why I do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love the way in which you're almost simplifying something that can often be painted as so complex. Like you said, going so deep in the process and you know, healing in itself, there are a lot of complexities, but I agree, sometimes we can get lost, like, wait, what are we doing all this for? So I appreciate your clarity of vision, and like, these are the simple steps I can take. If I can help one man or 10 men feel a little bit more safe and secure and grounded with direction, then I'm supporting this mission of this horizon that I'm moving towards. That feels,
Thank you.
Really clear. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
I can share. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, like my sort of brand is called life athletics. So looking at life like it's a game or a sport. What's your game? What's a win for you? What are your rules? Right? So this interests me a lot. And so using the metaphor of like going into a gym and saying, hello, trainer, I would like to get fit, and having them just hand you a program, that scenario angers me. And it angers me because so many, like, that is something that just happens a lot. And there's a lot of people giving advice. This is how you should do fitness, or this is how you should do a relationship, or this is how you should do anything in life. And if you want to be a power lifter versus a marathon runner versus a cross cyclist versus a basketball player versus anything, the training is different. And that's just sporty, right? So to someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, fitness just looks kind of like fitness, right? But when you listen to Michael Jordan's trainer talk about Jordan going from playing basketball to playing baseball, he's like, we have to redesign your body. So someone who knows what they're doing knows the intricacies and the nuances that go into high performance. Even just like regular performance, knowing what you're about matters. There's a lot of people wasting their time thinking that they're doing good, and they're actually hurting themselves, or just not having results, and thinking that something's wrong with them, when really they're like training as a power lifter, but what they want to do is run marathons. Right. And I hope people can like extend that metaphor to whatever it is that they're doing in their lives. But that makes me grumbly. And so I don't like to be prescriptive. It's one of the reasons why our men's group, again, ruffles some feathers, that we're not pushing some agenda. But I like it. We've had people of like from around the world. I think we've had people from every continent show up. Doesn't matter what color you are, like gay, straight, whatever. It doesn't matter. People have been showing up
Mm-hmm.
and feeling welcome.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it's been beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it is beautiful. It really is. And yeah, just it's really hitting home for me. And I know it's hitting home for a lot of the listeners to just really, yeah, where are you going? What do you want? That's such an important piece to address before we start doing all the work. And this is something I sometimes get frustrated with as well, and kind of the self-help growth and development world that has just taken off with the, online Instagram and this and that, is like people kind of marketing their coaching packages or programs as a way that they can fix people, do this the right way. And then people read that, oh, I can be better. And I can just feel, well, who's that for? Yeah. Well, according to who? And yeah,
And it's
that
hard
kind
when
of,
you have a character limit to be like, if this is who you are, if this is what you're after, like
yeah,
setting it up in a way that is like, I understand why people don't do
right.
that, but most people don't read through the lines and say, is this for me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the piece that I think is really missing. And then as a species, this is where my attention's been going. We're operating the same way that an individual does who doesn't have clear goals and is carrying trauma. And so the same way that on a micro level, each individual, there's so many people who are at that level. We're doing that collectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I have a lot of interest in figuring out where we're going. What are we doing? Why?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that. Hey there. I've got a puppy pulling on my shirt over here. Yeah. So something I knew I wanted to ask you about before we hit record and got on this call today was really the thing that first inspired me to want to invite you on the podcast. And it all started when I saw your tattoo for the first time on your arm. And
Great radio, the visuals.
yeah.
I'll show, because we can see each other right now, but no one else can see it.
Yeah.
Flex for you.
Yeah, sorry you guys missed that. Maybe you can just tell a little of the story behind that beautiful work of art on your arm for our listenership, since they can't see you flexing it in all of its glory. Give them a little background there.
So yeah, I have a full sleeve tattoo that I got in Bali. 2 artists worked 4 days in a row, 9-hour days to complete.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was odd till afterwards. So I just sat through the pain and was like, yeah, this is just a thing. One of the aspects, so there's a whole bunch of layers to it, different elements, but the aspect that you're talking about is there's a woman's face on the side of my arm. Unless you're talking about the wolf. You're talking about the wolf.
I'm talking about the woman.
And so, right. So the woman on my arm represents a part of me. She represents my inner woman. Mm-hmm. And so there was a moment a few years ago, I was going through a breakup in a really rough relationship. And I was at some event surrounded by people who knew me. And no one knew what was going on. But they could tell something was going on. Mm-hmm. And so a bunch of people kept coming up, well-meaning, giving me advice, kind of like what I was saying I have a pet peeve about. Mm-hmm. And saying, you know what you should do? You should really connect to your inner feminine. And I thought, gee, thanks. Well, I'm plenty emotional and just kind of like piss off.
Yeah.
Can I use foul language on this show?
Oh, you sure can.
Great. So I was like, but yeah, like my energy was like, thanks, fuck off. Like with a big smile. Like I didn't say it to them, but that's kind of like, ugh. And then someone who was a little closer to me came over. She saw that something was going on, and she is powerful and wonderful, and has caused me to have a few insights just through interacting with her. Like dancing with her once. Like we're friends. Nothing has ever happened beyond just being friends.
Yeah.
But dancing with her once, I felt so received and amplified by how she danced with me that I felt like a better dancer than I'd ever been before in my life.
Wow.
And so I came up with this distinction between receivers and takers. Takers drain me. Receivers amplify me. Right? And so like she has this energy that amplifies me. And so she came over and just sort of dropped in, was really present, and gave a similar piece of advice, but maybe because English isn't her first language, I never really found out. She said, you might really benefit from connecting to the relationship between you and your inner woman instead of inner feminine.
Yeah.
And the difference was it went from being some abstract concept of yin yang extremes to an actual anthropomorphized version of my inner woman. And almost immediately I overlapped it onto this Pixar movie that I love called Inside Out. And so like that was the inner workings of this young girl, and there's a control room with anthropomorphized versions of her emotions.
Yeah.
And so I sort of is the word conflate? I joined those two concepts. All of a sudden I started imagining if there was a control room that guided me, and there was a team, and one of the members of the team was supposed to be my inner woman. Well, where the hell was she? And immediately it's like, she's not there. So where is she? And so I looked around and it was like, oh, at some point people changed the security locks, and she went out for a walk and couldn't get back in. It was like, I don't know where that scenario came from, but that's what I made up.
Yep.
And so I went, let her in, gave her the new key codes, dusted off her desk, was like, I'm so sorry, and proceeded to clean up and make amends with that relationship.
Yeah.
And what showed up immediately was I wasn't treating her, like air quote, her, me, the same way that I would treat a woman in my life. So whether I was dating someone, whether they were lovers or not, just friends, just even a casual acquaintance, I grew up being taught to respect women. But somewhere I made up that I didn't deserve the same treatment. Right? So deeply ingrained, women get to say no. But somewhere I made up men have to just endure, suffer through it, tough it out.
Yeah.
Right? So that rough relationship that I mentioned earlier, had I been able to tap into my sovereign no, it probably would have been done in 2 weeks. Instead, it was this 4-year messiness.
Yeah.
Right? So tapping into the power of my inner woman allowed me to realize, like, I was living in some cheap little apartment because it was functional. Not because I couldn't afford a better place. It was just functional, right? The idea of just put a mattress on the floor. I'm fine. I don't need anything more, right?
Yeah.
To eat, just calories in my body, fuel me. But if I was going out with a woman, we'd go to somewhere nice. It doesn't mean necessarily expensive, but somewhere presentable, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't treating myself the same way. So I started to, right? The shirt I'm wearing is custom made. Most of my wardrobe is now. I started dressing a little bit nicer. I started eating a little bit nicer. I moved into a 2-bedroom villa with a giant stone bathtub. And like, I started honoring myself. Like, if there was a woman in my life, what is the base standard that I would allow her to suffer through? And it was a much higher standard than what I was setting up for myself. And so dropping into that relationship was really crucial. And what I found was that I struggled to maintain that relationship. If there was a woman in my life, I felt like I was cheating and had to navigate through that.
Ah,
And that led me to saying, no, this is my primary relationship.
yeah.
Next is me and my purpose. And I'm offering a third tier slot.
Mm-hmm.
No, that doesn't mean it's nothing, right? But an external romantic relationship will be number 3.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, like viewing it, like if I do bring someone else into my life,
Mm-hmm.
like if I was in a polyamorous relationship, right, I would want to check in with this other part of my life and say, like, what do you think about this person?
Yeah.
Do we want to bring this person in?
Yep.
Right. And it's added a clear filter, even though maybe it sounds complex. Like I know the answers immediately. And
When you
things that
check
I
in
would
with your
have,
inner woman, is that what you mean
yeah,
about a
yeah,
romantic prospect? Okay. Yeah.
about kind of anything.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. So I imagine her sometimes when I'm working, just kind of sitting on the couch near me, just reading a
Mm-hmm.
book. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that at first felt really weird,
Mm-hmm.
but actually soothes a part of me to the point that I wrote in a post on Valentine's Day, I used to be a walking need bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Now, anything that anyone else gives me is bonus. It's not a replacement for other people, but it's like great.
Yeah.
But like, I'm okay. I'm
Uh-huh.
really enjoying this dynamic. So
Yeah.
like I'm living in a place that's close to the water and there's dolphins in the water. I go kayaking and I imagine that I'm going out with this woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets to feel like what my inner man craves is like words of affirmation, things like physical touch. Sometimes I'll imagine on the back on the scooter that she's behind me holding me,
Yeah.
or that she says like, thank you for taking me on this adventure. You're such a like
Mm-hmm.
safe driver. I feel really secure. Like
Yeah.
just it might seem silly, but
Yeah.
it feeds a part of me that sort of lets everyone else off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No one else has to give me that. It's great if they do,
Right.
but because I've dealt with this, and then I started doing this with other people, sort of by accident, and it's been amazing seeing what they get from it.
Mm. Yeah, I'm one of those people who was fortunate to go through this experience with you, and I want to share a little bit about that in a moment. But first, I just want to, in response to what you shared, it's such an important piece in my world in terms of relationships, and almost what I'm hearing from you is like there used to be these expectations of how a romantic partner could maybe fill these needs for you that weren't being met,
Could
and
be,
now,
should be, yeah.
yeah. And as you know, expectation creates this weight on relationship, right? Because if I enter a partnership and I have a pile of expectations of how you're going to act so that I feel complete or I feel nourished, and then you're a human and you can't meet those expectations one day, that can create a lot of tension and conflict and disappointment. Um, so what you're saying is it feels so valuable. It's like, how can I learn to satiate my own needs, and you use the fun kind of lens of this inner man and inner woman, which for me is just really helpful visually, and it's kind of playful, um, to do that. And so then when that epic person does come along, it's like, oh great, I get to enjoy this, but I'm not constantly weighing them against my list of expectations of how they should be. um,
Yes,
yeah.
and
And yep, I know that
so
face by now. Ah.
yeah. um, there's still expectations for a relationship, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what, friendship, romantic, business. There's still expectations. They're different, so it's
Yeah.
not like fulfill this need of mine.
Mm-hmm.
But my friends, and I don't know who said it first because I've heard both of them say it, but I've heard 3 people say it. So it's either Adam Roa, Preston Smiles, or Lexi Panos. One of them says this, but they're all friends too. So like someone said it and they all say it now.
Yeah.
Um, love is unconditional, relationships aren't.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. And so like, yeah, if I'm going to be in a relationship, I do have expectations
Uh-huh.
for conduct. And like, I can still love someone, but it doesn't mean we're going to hang out if they
Right.
don't meet a certain standard.
Uh-huh.
But it's not like they have to complete me. That
Yeah.
sort of like pseudo romantic, codependent
Yeah.
need bomb,
Uh-huh.
right, I think is dangerous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great distinction. Uh-huh.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh wow. There's 4 dogs here now. All the dogs came on my porch. Great.
I don't have any dogs. You've got an abundance of dogs.
Apparently, my neighbor's dogs are all hanging out. Okay. I'm like, do I need to clear this? I think it's going to be okay. Okay. So, yeah, with your permission, I'd love to share a little bit from my experience with you. You were so kind as to walk me through this kind of process that, as you shared in your story, just kind of organically started happening with people after you did it with yourself. And there were some pieces of that were really profound to me that I wasn't expecting. So first I want to get your permission. Is it okay that I?
Oh yeah, full permission.
Great. Yeah. So it was really interesting. You kind of guided me into my inner control center, like you described. And, through your own guidance, kind of asked me to look around and describe who and what was there. And originally there was a woman there, and she was like this radiant queen, just like full of love. And, but she was kind of lost. She didn't really have direction. And then there was this man there, and he was a bit anxious, like trying to figure it all out and calculating a lot. I'm noticing I'm really distracted by this dog, so I'm going to pause and move them. Hey, get out of here. Let's go, Sandy. Sandy, come on. Go on. That's so funny. That never happens. Never all 3 of them. Come here. Great. So yeah, so there was this radiant woman just full of love, and she was this queen, and I just thought she was so beautiful, and yet she was kind of lost with no direction. And then there was this man, and he was kind of anxious, calculating, trying to do a bunch of things, and but almost like also not even really clear what he was doing, just kind of doing a lot. And what was so interesting as I was reflecting on this later is that really was almost a manifestation of what I learned growing up, which was kind of that the woman couldn't really take the lead. The man kind of had to do everything. And here was this man like trying to do it all, but he's almost stressed out. And then here's this woman who was clearly born to lead, that was kind of not given permission to lead. And so she was just kind of wandering. And there was so much more there for me, but I'm just curious with your experience kind of walking through this process with people. Do you find that what's inside as they go into their own kind of inner world is often a reflection of what they've learned, what they believe, what they saw? Perhaps it's always kind of different, but I'm curious about that because I really didn't have a lot of expectations, and I was pretty blown away by what I found about my own self going through that process.
Yeah, want to make sure got permission back for what you're asking me. So, yeah. Okay, we're gonna just talk about it.
Yeah.
What was intriguing for me with that was that when I first talked to you about this process, it felt like you didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, that's something. And then you went off, thought about it, had like a dropped-in experience of really appreciating the concept of having an inner man and inner woman, and so when we started, it was on top of a thing where it's like I had no idea what was going to come up, right? Maybe everything that was there to come up had already come up.
Yeah.
And so it was a really fun exploratory space. But what I find is that, and so people are like relaxed, their eyes are closed, and voices that might not tend to be accessible when we're fully in our like conscious mind
Yeah.
start to come out. And what they get access to is what is.
Mm.
And so the descriptions at the start are pretty much always what is,
Yeah.
not always what we want to be. So we didn't leave you at that scenario,
Right.
right? But that's what we met. And I was just as fascinated as you were. And so there are things that tend to be similar from person to person, but some things aren't. And so it is an exploration.
Yeah.
Asking you who should be in charge. Who would you like to have in charge? Like, would it be a good idea for this woman to be in charge? And having you be surprised that that was an option
Yeah.
surprised me, right?
Yeah.
And so it is part of my job is to not show up with all of my preconceived ideas, but to guide into the curiosity. Like the first time I ever did this was at the same restaurant where we met. I was sitting in some couches on the other side by myself, and a big swarm of people came in, and one of them knew me, and like, can we sit around you? I was like, sure. And they introduced me with such love and energy that people, like the people sitting next to me, were like, who are you? What do you do? I was like, well, I kind of like today. I was like, yeah, I coach and stuff, but I also just came up with this idea. Right? They're like, oh, that sounds interesting. Can we do that? It's like, sure, here? They're like, yeah. Like, okay. And so I had them close their eyes in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And they immediately pictured their inner control room and their inner woman. And both of them, because like Bali does tend to, for women wanting to drop into their inner goddess, like there's a lot of that energy.
Yeah.
And so they were like flowy skirt, really gorgeous, like female beings.
Yeah.
Right? But when I asked them about their inner man, like, is he, like, does he exist? And where is he? One of them was like, yeah, he's in sub basement number 5.
Wow.
And the other one was like, yeah, he's there, but he's not allowed to do anything, say anything, or touch anything. And then her eyes bolted open. She's like, wow, that describes my last 4 relationships.
Wow.
And what's kind of extra wow is she's been in a relationship with the same guy ever since. That was years ago.
Wow.
And it seems beautiful, right? Their connection. And like, I didn't really guide to that much, but just her having that piece click.
Yeah.
Opened something.
Yeah.
Right? With you, as soon as you got the permission to have your inner woman take charge, and she was clearly the part of you for that role.
Yeah.
Right? Your inner man shifted.
Right.
Right? And I think the control room even shifted, like the way that it looked. But the inner man shifted, and he got to be actually a more powerful figure, but not as domineering or imposing.
Yeah.
Much more relaxed, much more in his power.
Yeah.
Which allowed your inner woman to then relax. And this is what I find is that as people start to empower one, the other gets empowered. And this is sort of my thing when I was talking about the patriarchy earlier, whatever we want to call it. Strong, healthy men are a benefit to strong, healthy women.
Right.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
And this is very heteronormative and like, excuse me for, but yeah.
Yeah. It's not about one becoming strong and taking over the other, putting the other in their place. It's this, how can we empower each other and work together?
That's my view of
At least
strength.
in my view. Yeah.
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 But even like with the name Life Athletics, like my brand name, some people have had really bad experiences with gym class, and like athletics freaks them out. For some
Yeah.
people, you say the word power and they hear domineering, they hear
Uh-huh.
powerless. And
Yeah.
so it can be a tender conversation.
Right.
But I do, again, want to be clear that what I'm talking about is creating a dynamic internally that feels supportive. And it's amazing the number of women that I've done this with, where as soon as the inner man is like established and in place and solid and healthy,
Yeah.
um, their inner woman is allowed to breathe.
Yeah. Mm.
And it was, yeah, the flip of that for me, right? As soon as my inner woman
Right.
was in place, my inner man got to stop beating himself into life.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Wow. Yeah, I'm really seeing the possibility here because we've talked about sort of working with this on an internal level within oneself. We've also talked about the world at large, and the having healthy strong men and healthy strong women. So I'm really seeing the possibility here for bringing those two into balance, healing, having them work together within, whatever you want to call it, and how that can affect then how I treat men and women outside of me, and how we all treat each other, and how we eventually come together. It's which really resonates with my personal belief of the healing starts inside, and from there we can heal the world, or come back into collaboration or balance when I'm in collaboration within. So yeah, it just feels really powerful. A powerful
Love that.
possibility. Yeah. Thanks
There's
for
a lot of like yes and maybe in my system. So the healing, I do think starts, I think the healing has to happen inside, whether it starts inside or not, who knows?
yeah.
I like the quote from Marianne Williamson. Like most people know the beginning and they attribute it to Nelson Mandela, but that idea of our deepest fear isn't that we're inadequate, our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure, that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Later on in that paragraph, she says, we're all here to make manifest the glory of God that's inside of us. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
in some of us, it's in all of us. And as we give ourselves permission to be, we unconsciously give others permission to do so as well.
Yeah.
So the healing starts inside, but it also can be triggered from outside. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, I try not to be too prescriptive,
Right.
because it can be really beautiful to meet someone who's glowing from the inside. That
Yeah.
can be healing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. But I do think eventually it has to be done internally as well.
Right. Uh-huh. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
good distinction. Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like wherever you get it from, get it,
Right.
as
Whatever
far as I'm concerned.
triggers it or gets it going. Great.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want the world to
Yeah.
heal.
Yeah. I
The,
hear
the number
you.
of people who stop themselves are like, oh no, it should be starting from this place. They said so. But now I'm feeling it from here. It's like, whatever works
Yeah.
is my
Uh-huh.
philosophy.
Yeah. It's a great reminder. Whatever works. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
also a little piece that I want to add. Like
Yep.
I've extended this. So we did that first piece, and I generally feel like that's primary. But I've
Mm-hmm.
also extended it where I've had my inner man and inner woman interact with my inner child.
Yep.
Right? I've done a process where I have people interact with the archetype of perfect divine mother, perfect divine father,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of release their biological parents from having to be that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing because people are able to access that energy immediately.
Yep.
And almost everyone, when I take them through this process and say, well, what would be possible if you were being loved this way? They're like, anything. And they just feel like you can hear their voices change, their bodies shift,
Yeah.
and they access it in seconds.
Mm.
And so to me, it speaks, I think, like we have the codes to be healed
Mm-hmm.
internally, right? Getting rid of all of the other distraction
Mm-hmm.
sometimes is what's needed. thinking that our partner is supposed to be our person,
Right.
or our parents are supposed to be, no, like
Mm-hmm.
my mother is supposed to be this, my father is supposed to be that.
Yeah.
They're flawed humans just like anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are more capable than others at being parents,
Yeah.
right? But the more we can like source it ourselves
Mm.
and take responsibility, the more we can just get on with it. Like there is a very pragmatic element to it. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want my life to be more griping. Like I spent a long time rolling around in my unprocessed traumas.
Mm-hmm.
So no judgment of anyone going through that.
Yeah.
Just to say it's really nice on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and the quicker, like it was really quick when I started healing my trauma.
Mm-hmm.
What slowed me down was all the resistance
Yeah.
and cleverness that I had that was in the way.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, for whatever that's
Yeah.
worth, I wanted to say that bit.
Yeah. It's really beautiful reminder. Thank you. Thank you for that. Um, yeah. And there's just been so much here. I'm so grateful for you coming and just sharing your experience and sharing yourself and your wisdom accumulated through just your own lived experience. It's really a blessing. And yeah,
Thank you.
as we prepare to wind down here, I guess I just want to turn it back one last time. And if there's anything else that's coming through in this moment that wants to be shared. Here today with all who are listening, any last words of wisdom that want to come out before we?
There's so much that I want to just keep talking about.
Uh-huh.
One bit that's coming up is similar to what I said, where at the start of that process that we focused on today,
Mm-hmm.
we describe what is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that that's what needs to be, right? Or
Right.
where we're not stuck there. And why
Mm-hmm.
I bring that up is so often I think people misinterpret emotions
Mm-hmm.
and feelings
Yeah.
as truth. But more often than not, they're just a description of what currently is,
Mm.
not what needs to be or what should be.
Mm.
And we get to choose. We get to
Yeah.
choose what are we going to honor. And so it can be difficult to choose the horizon self over the present self,
Mm-hmm.
because present self fights for survival. But to level up, it often does come at that cost, and it can feel uncomfortable. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
work with people, I often talk about safety,
Mm-hmm.
and we get to choose which part of us are we going to keep safe,
Mm.
right? And I spent a long time fighting for the safety of the familiar,
Mm.
even though I would have told anyone listening that it's not what I wanted in my life. I was
Right.
holding on as hard as I could. I'm sure in some ways I still am in some
Mm-hmm.
areas of my life, but it doesn't actually serve me. And the quicker I've been able to let go, and the people that I coach, the people who are able to detach the fastest are the
Mm-hmm.
ones that move forward the fastest.
Yeah.
So that's what's coming up for me, is like whether or not you have a strong, healthy relationship with your inner man, inner woman, inner child, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's possible to have that internal system work really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what came up for me.
Yeah. Mm. So good. It's so good. And
You're so good.
thank you, Nik Wood. Yeah, I've noticed in my own life, just going through my own. I also am always looking at safety. It's just something that's been so big and important in my life. And I noticed at one point, wow, I'm so wired to feel unsafe in the unknown, and the familiar is wired to feel safe. And so for me, as someone who takes a lot of leaps and travels around the world, I've been slowly working to rewire myself to actually find safety in that unknown, which then helps me to take those leaps or leave behind the familiar when that's what I'm feeling called to do. Right. So that just really
It's so
resonates.
powerful. I know we're trying to wrap up, and I'm sorry I
No,
keep
it's
talking,
okay. It's okay. We have time.
because like safety isn't a one size fits all thing,
Right.
right? Like one metaphor that I like is if I was on top of a triple black diamond ski run, I would be terrified because I've gone skiing 3 or 4 times in my life. So I should
Mm-hmm.
not be on top of that kind of run, right?
Yeah.
But someone who knows what they're doing, that's exciting,
Yeah.
right? So safety is very relative. And
Yes.
yet I was trying to normalize, like to bring safety into my body because I've been through a whole bunch, like we didn't even touch on, like so many things. Like
So
I'm
many things.
recovering from a major injury for the last year and a half, and
Yeah.
trauma release that I had just before that injury, like all that stuff working through my system. I
Right.
was trying to find safety in my body and really fixating on that kind of like Zen, Om, like calm space. But
Yeah.
life's not always that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
And so I was out kayaking the other night for the sunset, and then it was dark, and the wind picked up, and the waves were picking up. And I was like, oh, geez, should I, like, by myself? I was wearing a life jacket. And it's decently shallow, so I could probably stand up 50
Uh-huh.
meters from shore, right?
Right.
But still, in my system was like, should I just go to shore now,
Uh-huh.
right? Should I just get out of this? And I just kept feeling in, like, it really wasn't that bad.
Uh-huh.
And just normalizing, like, I'm okay. I'm okay. I
Mm.
made it. Right. And I was trying not to be silly about it. Like if it got worse, I was going to just go to shore.
Yeah.
But that for me was this metaphor of finding safety, but it doesn't always mean the same thing.
Right. The circumstances for safety aren't the same for every person or for one person in every moment, right? It's probably always changing.
Leaning into the fact that I was geared up and skilled enough to make it out of that situation and
Yeah.
trust that as where I found my safety.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. The water doesn't have to be glass like a mirror for me to
Yeah.
be okay.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And life doesn't have to be tidied up to and little bow on it to make sure that everything is aligned perfectly before I can feel safety in my system.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. For me, I often think about sort of external avenues to safety and internal avenues to safety. And for my personal perception is my truest form of safety exists within. And then there's external environments that can, so like for your example, being on the top of a black diamond for an inexperienced skier, that can feel really unsafe, right? It's unfamiliar, it's high up, there's weather conditions that we're not comfortable with. But for me, the truest form of safety is in my body. So can I be out in the kayak where the wind's picking up a little bit and the waves are there, and then still find that sense of safety from within? And that's a question I'm still contemplating and working with in my own life. So
And it shows up. The waves might be a tough conversation,
right. Mm-hmm.
right? The waves might be, yeah, I need to like pick my business up after recovering for a year and a half from an intense injury and recovering from
Yeah.
trauma. And
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I'm starting kind of from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like just to be vulnerable. That's sort of my thing is like, oh, I'm kind of starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And all of the like, damn it. Like I had built a pretty nice momentum before
Yeah.
that. Right.
Uh-huh.
So finding safety in that as well. So
Yeah.
it's there live and present for me. And
Yeah.
I'm
Me
sure
as
people
well.
have their own versions.
Yeah.
The joy
Yeah.
of being human.
Sure is. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that. Such a perfectly placed piece, just organically in this conversation as a close. So, yeah, I want to thank you again. And I will, as always, include any relevant links and all that stuff in the show notes. And if there's anything you'd like to share about what you have in your world, and I know you have a podcast and a coaching business yourself. If there's anything that you'd like to share now for the listeners, and please do so.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. Like I'm so good at like boosting other people, and when it's like
Uh-huh.
talk to yourself, it's like, yeah, I've got a podcast. It's called the Life Athletics Podcast. There's over
Mhm.
200 episodes of me talking to some pretty awesome people.
Yep.
Um, I have a coaching program that is like a 6-month journey into your horizon life, and
Mm.
people have gone from being pretty broke to creating multi-million-dollar businesses. They've transformed their bodies. They found loves of their lives. This one person, I really love their story because they already had millions of dollars, like chiseled abs, and they weren't ever happy. And they found
Mm.
self-acceptance for the first time ever. And
Oh.
that really touched me. So we sort of drop in. There's a lot of like really getting strong and stable first, and then we start visioning and then building forward to that
Mm.
horizon life.
Mm-hmm.
And inside of that, I often will do the exercises that we talked about today.
Yeah.
But also, people are starting to ask for those exercises to be offered individually. And
Right.
so, if people are into it, that's also possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah, wonderful. I think that's a wonderful offering to have on its own because it was so powerful for me. Just 1 hour with you there. So thank you so much, Nik. Yeah, just appreciating you for being here. Yeah.
Receiving that appreciation, and yeah, I appreciate you greatly. Big
Mm.
hugs.
Big hugs.
Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of the Life Athletics Nikki Sunshine podcast. And new episodes of the Life Athletics podcast will be coming out soon. There is also a new podcast that I'm putting out called Next Us, where I'm asking experts from around the world what their vision for the future of life on Earth and humanity might be. So find us wherever you listen to podcasts at Next Us.